There have always been two types of people in history. Some carry titles, but silence follows them. They have offices, positions, orders, but they do not have the hearts of the people. And others, even without loud titles, without crowns or nameplates on doors, change the lives of those around them. People listen to them. People respect them. People choose them. Why is that? Because true leadership cannot be bought, and it doesn't come with a diploma or a position. Leadership is a test of character. And there are 7 qualities that distinguish those who are followed from those who are fled from. Today we will unveil these 7 foundations, and each of them can serve as a mirror for you. The first trait, strength without harshness. Leadership begins with strength. But let's clarify, what kind of strength? Because strength has 2 sides. It can lift a person to the top, or it can destroy relationships and trust forever. Jim Rohn loved to say, "Let's learn to be strong but not rude." In these words lies a depth we often underestimate because many people confuse strength with harshness and confidence with rudeness. And here's the tragedy. When we confuse these concepts, we think that authority is built through shouting, through orders, through fear. But true authority never grows from fear. Remember the farmers among whom young Jim Rohn grew up. There in the fields of Idaho, a father's strength was shown, not in raised voices, but in the ability to get up at 5 in the morning and do what needed to be done. Harshness could give a temporary effect to push, pressure, shout. But the harvest didn't come from yelling, it came from daily discipline. And Rohn learned this lesson. Strength is not about words. Strength is about actions. A true leader knows how to keep firmness in their voice without resorting to humiliation. They can make unpopular decisions without losing their humanity. Think about it. Who earns more of your respect? The one who constantly asserts their authority with every word, or the one who radiates inner strength even in silence? Strength without harshness is when you can say no, and that no sounds final yet still dignified. It's when you can demand results without demeaning others. It's when you can look someone straight in the eye even when they're wrong, and stand your ground without aggression. Think of any great mentor or leader you respected. Their strength wasn't in belittling others. Their strength was in the ability to remain steadfast when others wavered, to stay grounded when everyone else doubted, to be firm when others looked for excuses to give up. Jim Rohn said, "Strength without kindness turns into cruelty, and strength without respect becomes dictatorship. But strength combined with wisdom builds character. It creates that invisible foundation on which others are willing to stand with you." Ask yourself today, what does my strength look like? Do people around me feel supported by it, or do they fear it might break them? Do my words uplift others, or do they wound? Do my actions earn respect, or merely silence from fear? Because here's the truth. Harshness is never strength. It's only a shadow, an attempt to compensate for inner weakness. And true strength is always quiet, like a deep river. It doesn't need to be proven by shouting. It's visible in results, in actions, in presence. And this is exactly where leadership begins, in the ability to be strong without being rude. The second trait, kindness without weakness. When Jim was asked why people followed him willingly, he would smile and answer simply, kindness. But each time he would add a second word in his mind boundaries. Because for him, kindness never meant compliance that dissolves character. Since childhood, he knew the gentle voice of a father waking him at 5 in the morning, and at the same time the firm rule, the fields won't plow themselves. And he carried this formula throughout his life, a warm heart and a strong spine. In the audiences he spoke to, there were often people waiting for comforting speeches, but Jim came not with comfort, but with truth spoken gently, yet directly. He listened carefully to questions, looked people in the eye, and when he heard, "I'm unlucky," he responded kindly without a hint of sarcasm. "Then change what you can control." There was no harshness in that. There was respect for a person's time, their potential, and the truth that heals when spoken with dignity. For him, kindness was not condescension. It was the recognition of an adult, responsible individual in every conversation. He often saw how the word kindness was mistaken for timidity. Timidity avoids uncomfortable conversations, fears emotions, swallows the truth to keep the surface undisturbed. Kindness does the opposite. It sits down beside you and speaks about what matters without humiliation. He knew how to say no in a way that didn't feel like rejection, but an invitation to grow. And when someone asked to lower the bar, he didn't lower it. He lifted the person to meet it, patiently, step by step, showing exactly how. His mentorship was full of quiet moments. A young entrepreneur slumped under the weight of failure expected sympathy. Jim listened, paused, and gently asked, "What part of this is your responsibility?" The question came softly, yet cut like a surgical knife. It separated the excuses from what could already be changed today. He didn't rush, didn't scold. He simply illuminated the path one would have to walk alone. And people did because they felt treated with kindness and with maturity. His kindness always took the form of concrete action. It was the habit of listening fully before responding, the habit of clarifying, not labeling, the habit of asking, "What's your next small step?" when someone got lost in big dreams, and at the same time, unwavering principles. If you promised, fulfill it. If you failed, own it and fix it. Kindness without weakness sounded in his voice as calm clarity. You can do better, and I believe you will. At times, he was mistaken for being too soft, but those who worked with him longer saw the softness was only the surface. Inside stood a firm core discipline, responsibility, respect for time, for effort, for one's word. He never let kindness blur boundaries. If someone's behavior damaged the team or the values, he stopped it immediately, without shouting, without humiliation, but firmly. Because true kindness always sides with good. It protects, nurtures, and shapes, not coddles weakness. Jim often said that kindness is a kind of strength, the strength to call things by their name without raising your voice, the strength to uphold your own standards without imposing them arrogantly, the strength to see a better version of someone and speak to that version. That's why people grew around him. They weren't afraid to make mistakes because they knew mistakes wouldn't become brands. They weren't afraid of the truth because truth wouldn't become a whip. Everyone felt it was safe to grow stronger with him. This is the difference between kindness and weakness. Weakness seeks approval. Kindness seeks to serve. Weakness dodges responsibility. Kindness takes it first. Weakness fears disappointing others. Kindness fears betraying the truth. And when a manager becomes a leader, this is the shift from the desire to be liked to the ability to help others change. Looking at Jim from the outside, it was easy to notice one simple thing. Trust was born not from his eloquence, but from the blend of warmth and clarity. He knew how to comfort and guide, to uplift and ground, to listen and not give in on what mattered. That's why his kindness didn't soften discipline, it made it acceptable. It led, it didn't pressure. Kindness without weakness is the second brick in the foundation of leadership. It creates a space where people are ready to face the truth, work on themselves, and grow faster than yesterday. Because in the presence of such kindness, it's easy to breathe and hard to lie to yourself. And in that kind of atmosphere, a team is born, one that's held together not by fear, but by dignity. The next step becomes clear. If strength must be without harshness, then kindness without compromise to truth. And with that awareness, it becomes clear why some people are worth following even into the fog. The third trait, courage without bullying. When Jim spoke about courage, he always began with a simple image of farmer's field. If you want to harvest, he would say, you must face the weeds, the rain, and the bugs head on. For him, courage wasn't a loud word, it was a daily routine, the ability to step into the field when others hid from the storm. In his own life, courage didn't come instantly. Young Jim avoided risk for a long time. He clung to a familiar job, made excuses about circumstances, and feared taking the wrong step. Only after meeting his mentor did he realize the greatest danger wasn't in losing, but in never trying. He understood that cowardice disguised as caution keeps thousands of people stuck in the same place for years. Real movement begins where the courage to take the first step into the unknown appears. But alongside this, Jim always warned, courage is easy to mistake for aggression. People sometimes think being brave means pushing others, breaking through, bulldozing your way forward. He called that bullying an empty attempt to prove strength, which actually hides inner weakness. A bully intimidates but doesn't inspire. He might force obedience, but can never truly lead. Jim's courage looked very different. When an unpopular truth had to be said, he spoke it calmly and directly. When a decision needed to be made that would affect hundreds of people, he stepped forward without shifting the responsibility. When it was time to admit his own mistakes, he did so publicly because he understood. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. He often said that courage means taking the first arrow, being the first to stand up and say, I'll take this on, the first to walk into uncertainty so others can see that the path is possible. That's the difference between courage and bullying. A true leader takes the risk himself, not from behind others' backs. Imagine someone stepping onto a stage to speak before thousands. Their voice trembles slightly, hands are cold, but they begin and the crowd falls silent. This isn't about perfect confidence, it's about the resolve to be honest, to be vulnerable, to speak even when afraid. That was Jim's kind of courage. Not grand gestures, but small daily victories over fear. He learned to lead from the front, even when he didn't have all the answers, because he knew a leader doesn't always provide ready-made solutions, but always sets an example. And it was that example that inspired others to overcome their own barriers. People looked at him and thought, if he can do it, so can I. Courage without bullying is the ability to look danger in the eye without turning it into a show. It's the readiness to act while others wait. It's the strength to take the hit without turning it into a performance. And it's the honesty to admit to yourself, fear will always be there, but it doesn't get to lead. Jim reminded people, no one remembers how many times you failed. They remember the moments when you gathered your courage and moved forward. He knew that courage opens the doors to opportunities that will never appear to those who only choose safety. So he taught, if you want to be a leader, be ready to step onto the field first, to take the risk first, to speak the truth first, and to take the blow in a way that makes others feel they can follow you, because you're not chasing gain, you're truly leading. This is the third trait of a great leader, to be courageous but not a bully. It's not about shouting or aggression, it's about quiet strength that walks ahead and shows the way. The fourth trait, humility without timidity. When Jim was asked what keeps a leader grounded at the top, he spoke about humility not as meekness but as clarity of perspective. He remembered well how easy it is to get lost amid applause and personal illusions, so he kept a simple compass in his heart. I am a student. Even when the room gave him a standing ovation, he remained that boy from rural Idaho, the one who listens intently, takes notes, and isn't afraid to ask questions. For him, humility wasn't about slouched shoulders. It was about standing tall with an open gaze. Not, I'm worth nothing, but I've still got room to grow. He made a clear distinction between humility and timidity. Timidity is the fear of being noticed, the fear of speaking up, the fear of taking responsibility. It whispers, stay quiet, avoid mistakes, you won't be judged. Humility works differently. It steps forward, acknowledges limits, seeks advice, and gets to work. In his youth, when Jim met his mentor, he didn't pretend to know it all. He openly admitted his mess debts, doubts, confusion, and in that honesty there was no shame, only the courage to tell the truth. That moment of humility opened doors timidity had kept shut. In teamwork, he constantly asked grounded questions. What did we miss? Who sees the blind spot? Where did I go wrong in this decision? These questions didn't weaken his authority, they strengthened trust. People saw a leader who didn't hide behind titles or play the infallible role. He didn't pound the table to assert himself, he searched for truth, even when it contradicted his previous beliefs. Humility made him adaptable, and adaptability made him effective. There were moments when he had to say publicly, I was wrong, and he did without long-winded excuses or pointing fingers. That habit disarmed the room and brought people closer. Because humility didn't shrink him, it expanded the space for everyone else to grow. Around him, it was safe to be imperfect, yet shameful to stay the same as yesterday. His example taught a mistake isn't the end of the story, it's the first line of a new chapter, if you have the courage to name it. Humility also meant recognizing the laws of reality, seasonality, cause and effect, the price of results. He never bargained with facts or wasted energy fantasizing about the easy way. When reality made demands, he didn't take offense, he adjusted. Instead of asking, why is this so hard, he asked, what can I improve? That mindset didn't extinguish his fire, it focused it into work, discipline, structure, mastery. At the same time, he believed humility was the source of true dignity. A person who sees the distance between themselves and the stars doesn't pretend to be all-powerful, but neither do they look down in defeat. They look up and take a step forward. That's how he entered new rooms, new projects, new audiences, with respect for the people and a firm intention to give them the best of his experience. Where timidity whispers, what if I fail? Humility says, I'll grow and I'll succeed next time. In daily life, it looks simple. After speeches, he thanked the tech crew. In negotiations, he acknowledged his opponent's strong points. In shared victories, he shared the credit. In shared failures, he took a portion of the blame. These weren't PR gestures, they came from a deep understanding. No one builds anything great alone. Humility makes room for others, and that's why there were always people ready to work alongside him. Important to note, humility didn't lower his standards. On the contrary, it raised them. When he said, "I don't know everything," he wasn't evading responsibility. He was opening the door to learning and setting a higher bar for behavior, to listen, verify, clarify, and improve. Where timidity settles for, "we'll manage somehow," humility demands we must do better. And in that difference, a culture was born, one where respect for people was matched by respect for results. And one more thing, humility protected him from the most cunning trap arrogance bred by success. He never let applause dictate the quality of his thinking. After a big tour, he returned to simple things. Early mornings, reading, note-taking, honest self-evaluation of his talks. It wasn't a ritual of modesty, it was a growth strategy. Because once a leader stops learning, they stop leading, they stagnate. And so do those who follow them. That's why the fourth trait is this: humility without timidity. It's not submission or self-deprecation. It's a clear-eyed view of oneself, the willingness to learn, the courage to face reality, and the strength to say, "I can do better." This is the soil from which trusted authority grows quietly without pressure or empty words. And it's that very soil that prepares the stage for the next step for pride without arrogance, where honor for achievements doesn't eclipse reverence for truth. The fifth trait, pride without arrogance. Jim Rohn often said, "Without pride, true ambition is impossible. A person who doesn't feel pride in themselves, their work, or their community will never have an inner fire." But he was quick to add, pride walks a fine line. Cross it, and it turns into arrogance, the kind that destroys trust, pushes people away, and closes doors to opportunity. His own story illustrated this clearly. He started from nothing with debts, disappointments, and the sense that life had passed him by. And when he finally achieved results, real results, not pennies, but a fair reward for hard work, he felt pride. But it wasn't pride rooted in vanity, it was quiet gratitude. I did it. I made it through. He wasn't proud of being better than someone else. He was proud that yesterday's Jim had become better than himself. In his talks, he always emphasized real pride is directed outward. It's pride in family, in the team, in the people growing alongside you. He often said, be proud of your community, your work, your contribution, because pride born from shared experiences unites. It inspires, it builds a foundation for collective victories. At the same time, Jim frequently warned about the flip side. Do you know the worst kind of arrogance, he would ask? Arrogance born of ignorance. He explained, a smart person who's a bit cocky might still be tolerated, but an ignorant person convinced of their own infallibility, that's a disaster. That kind of arrogance blocks learning, growth, and honest feedback. In the end, it leaves one isolated with no friends, no students, no one who wants to stay close. He had seen both kinds of people. Some, after their first taste of success, started looking down on others. Their language changed. We did it became I did it. Let's try turned into I have nothing more to learn. And he saw how quickly they lost influence, teams unraveled, partners left, students stopped listening. Because arrogance doesn't inspire, it kills trust. And then he saw others, those whose pride glowed but didn't blind. They could say, yes, I'm happy about this win, but even more, I'm proud that we achieved it together. Jim himself always emphasized his greatest treasure wasn't money or fame, it was the people who changed their lives thanks to his advice. His real pride was in students who surpassed the teacher. That was his credo. Pride must be rooted in achievement, not in self-praise. In gratitude, not arrogance. In service, not display. Pride without arrogance isn't a wall that separates, it's a lighthouse that guides others forward. Jim knew how to celebrate victories. He knew how to take joy in results, raise a glass for success, and give thanks for partnerships. But he never let pride turn into poison, because he knew a true leader always remembers they are just part of a larger story. And here lies the key lesson. Pride gives power when it's pure. It stirs the spirit, broadens horizons, and strengthens character. But arrogance destroys, it narrows, it blinds with the illusion of perfection. That's why a leader must guard this balance every day. In the end, Jim taught, pride is fuel, arrogance is a brake. The first lifts you and those around you. The second stops you halfway and leaves you alone. So the fifth trait of a great leader is pride without arrogance, the ability to recognize your victories while staying open to learning, gratitude, and continued growth. The sixth trait, humor without foolishness. When Jim spoke about serious things, he could make the audience smile in a way that eased tension and sharpened their thinking. His humor wasn't decoration or a gimmick. It was a tool for clarity. He believed if an idea is truly strong, it can withstand the light of a smile. He also knew that laughter opens doors where lectures can't get through. That's why, even in the most serious moments, he allowed short, ironic detours that cleared the air and brought complex truths closer. His humor never belittled people. He didn't make fun of anyone's background, mistakes, or appearance. If he joked, it was first and foremost about himself, about his clumsiness at the start of his career, his failures, his youthful hopes. In doing so, he showed, making mistakes isn't shameful, refusing to learn from them is. His self-irony disarmed the audience and at the same time raised the bar. In the presence of such a smile, it's easier to admit your flaws because you understand this isn't a verdict, it's material to work with. There was one occasion when a heated team discussion had reached a dead end. Everyone was speaking loudly, but no one was addressing the core issue. Jim listened, then calmly said, "We're arguing so hard for our truths, we've forgotten to check the facts." The room smiled, tension melted, people sat down, pulled out their notes, and the conversation got back on track. That was his humor, precise, brief, and refocusing. Not a show, not fireworks, a quiet flame that lit the way. He clearly understood the difference between wit and nonsense. Nonsense runs from substance, dissolves discipline, and wastes time. Wit, on the other hand, sharpens thought. Nonsense craves applause. Wit seeks understanding. That's why on stage he never turned his talks into comedy. His laughter fed the seriousness of the topic, not distracted from it. A short pause, a barely noticeable smile, a single phrase, and the audience was ready for the next level. Humor also helped him in difficult conversations. When the truth was hard for someone to hear, he gently cushioned it with a smile. "Seems we've chosen a difficult path to not work every day and still expect big results," he'd say, watching closely. The person would laugh, but in that laugh came recognition. "Yes, that's exactly what I've been doing." The smile lowered defenses, and the truth did its work without offense, without resistance, with maturity. He wasn't afraid to appear simple. He'd share stories of how he got tangled in his early notes, how nervous he was in front of small audiences, how he searched for the right words and didn't always find them immediately. These stories weren't self-indulgent, they were stepping stones others could walk. He smiled, and that smile made others feel human, not just cogs in a success machine. A leader who can laugh at himself frees the team from the fear of failure and invites them to be bold. In negotiations, his wit often saved time and reputations. When a counterpart dragged out pauses and dodged specifics, Jim would gently sum it up. "Wonderful, we've at least agreed on one thing, that we need to agree." People laughed but moved toward resolution. His humor nudged action, never hid behind it, because he had no tolerance for flippancy. If there was a joke, it was never, instead of work, it was in service of the work. He believed true laughter returns a person to common sense. In a room dulled by fatigue, he might describe the absurdity of our habit to wait for the perfect moment, and the audience would light up. People caught themselves in that same absurdity. Then they'd go home and take the first step. That's how to measure the strength of humor, not by the number of laughs in the room, but by the number of actions afterward. He also knew boundaries. Some topics don't tolerate jokes, another's pain, failure, dignity. In those moments, he took off his hat and spoke seriously. His respect for human experience was greater than the temptation for a cheap laugh. That's why, when he did smile, people trusted it. They knew his humor was safe, not harmful. Humor without foolishness is disciplined thinking, not laziness. It's the ability to find the shortest path to the heart without losing depth. It's the power to ease without oversimplifying and to lift without belittling. Jim used it as skillfully as a farmer uses rain, not to soak the field but to water the seed. And the seed was always responsibility. That's why the sixth trait of a great leader is just this: bright, respectful, precise humor that serves the truth and the mission. It removes fear, opens ears, and sparks the fire to do better. And now it's time to move to the seventh trait, where the smile gives way to sobriety, the ability to face reality without illusions or embellishment. The seventh trait, the ability to deal with reality. For Jim, reality was never the enemy. The real enemy was illusion, those soft blankets under which it feels so comfortable to freeze. He grew up on land where the seasons don't bend to your mood. Spring doesn't ask if you're ready, and autumn won't wait until you're ripe. That's where he learned a simple truth. Facts don't negotiate. If a field isn't sown, there will be no harvest. If you worked half-heartedly yesterday, don't expect miracles today. In adult life, he applied this rule to everything he touched. When a team brought him an optimistic forecast, he didn't ask for polished language, he asked for numbers and actions. What do we know for sure? What only seems true? What can we verify by the end of the day? These three questions cleared the fog. At first, people felt uneasy. Reality is cold, it doesn't flatter. But moments later, shoulders straightened because there's relief and clarity. That's where the path begins. He distinguished realism from cynicism. The cynic says, it won't work, and sits still, justifying inaction. The realist says, this is how things are, and finds ways to act within the laws of the world. Jim built his strategies not on wishes, but on cause and effect. If you want a different result, change the cause, not the poster on the wall. That kind of sobriety didn't kill hope, it made it functional. In tough times, he never allowed himself the luxury of panic. When markets wobbled, when plans collapsed, when human weaknesses surfaced, he brought everyone back to the tracking sheet. Where did we lose discipline? Where did we overestimate ourselves? Where did we miss a risk? For him, realism was an exercise in honor, to name his share of responsibility first. While others looked for someone to blame, he looked for levers, and that's why he found them faster. He applied the same lens in personal mentoring. People would come to him with pain, lack of time, money, support. He listened carefully and then gently brought the conversation back to measurable things. How many hours did you invest in your development this week? How many pages did you read? How many calls did you make? Reality loves accounting. It responds to what has been counted and done, not to what felt sincere but never got executed. He didn't believe in lucky breaks. He believed in the law of sowing and reaping. Results delayed? Check your planting. A lot of noise? Check what you're actually doing, not what you're talking about. And when the truth turned out to be unpleasant, he didn't cover it with eloquence. Better a sharp sunrise than a sweet night with no awakening. Because the pain of meeting reality is medicinal, it drains the swelling of illusion and restores motion. He used his journal as a tool of sobriety. It didn't just record thoughts, it recorded evidence, what works, what doesn't, where exactly the breakdown occurred. Paper wouldn't let him lie to himself for the third time. When your own handwritten dates, steps, and outcomes stare back at you, there's nowhere to hide. And that was a gift. Honest pages restored a sense of control. Reality stopped being scary because it took the shape of a plan. He also knew that realism requires the courage to let go, of projects that look good but never take flight, of team members who refuse to grow up, of your own ideas when the data proves them weak. For Jim, letting go meant making space for something stronger. It wasn't defeat, it was a strategic pause. Without it, victory only comes by accident. The biggest trap he warned about was the romance of self-deception. Someday, somehow, we'll see, comforting words that lull you to sleep and steal your years. He taught people to replace them with dates, metrics, and next steps. Realistic language is the language of action. Today, by 5 p.m., 3 attempts, 15 responses, 10 pages. That's how a dream removes its costume and shows the face of a goal. And finally, Jim loved to repeat a simple image. You're standing in a field after a heavy rain. The clay is heavy, your feet sink, your arms are tired, but the clouds are clearing, and you see everything still here, the land, the seeds, your tools, your will. Reality is not a sentence, it's a stage. It's harsh toward dreamers, but incredibly generous to those who work by its rules. So, the seventh trait of a great leader sounds like this: act with truth. Don't look away, don't paint over the cracks. Don't build plans on wishful thinking. Look facts in the eye, turn them into decisions, and confirm your choices with daily action, because that's exactly where illusions end and true influence begins. The 7 traits we've just talked about, they're not a collection of pretty ideas. They're not quotes to hang on the wall. They're a mirror. And today that mirror turns to face you. Pause for a moment and allow yourself to look into it honestly. Not for the public, not for your colleagues, not even for your family, just for you. Feel this question: which of the 7 traits is alive in me today, and which one exists only as a desire? Maybe you're strong, but sometimes you allow that strength to turn into harshness where wise silence is needed. Maybe you're kind, but that kindness too often turns into weakness when you stay silent instead of speaking the truth. Maybe you're courageous, but you catch yourself when that courage becomes pressure, one that intimidates rather than inspires. Or maybe you feel proud of your achievements, but somewhere deep inside, a dangerous note of arrogance creeps in. These questions don't accuse, they awaken. Because real growth begins the moment we acknowledge our imbalances. Do the exercise Jim recommended. Take a sheet of paper or open your journal. Write 7 lines, each one with the name of a trait: strength, kindness, courage, humility, pride, humor, realism. Next to each one, give yourself a score from 1 to 10. 1 meaning this quality is almost absent from my daily life. 10 meaning this quality has become part of my character. Don't rush. Give yourself a few minutes of quiet. Now comes the most important part. Don't ask how to raise all the scores at once. Ask, which one trait am I ready to develop over the next 30 days? Choose it, and write down small steps. What will you do tomorrow to bring that trait into your reality? Because it's practice that separates the listener from the leader. Leadership doesn't come from grand intentions, it grows from small, repeated actions. Imagine every viewer of this video now holding that sheet of paper. Hundreds, thousands of sheets with 7 lines, and each person deciding where to write, working on this. That's how culture changes. That's how leaders are born. That's how a wave of influence begins. So here's the question, and it's just for you. Which one trait will you choose to grow this month? Strength without harshness, kindness without weakness, courage without bullying, humility without timidity, pride without arrogance, humor without foolishness, or perhaps the ability to face the truth? Choose, write it down, and take the first step today. Because a true leader doesn't begin tomorrow, they begin in this moment. Leadership is not a title and not applause. It's the daily choice to hold the standard when no one's watching. The 7 bricks we've talked about don't build a stage, they build character. Strength without harshness, kindness with boundaries, courage without pressure, humility without fear, pride without arrogance, humor without foolishness, and a sober gaze toward the facts. When these qualities become habits, they create a space where people grow faster than their excuses. A leader doesn't demand trust, he earns it. He sows discipline in the ordinary days to reap influence when it matters most. And when the night of doubt comes, it's his quiet example that keeps the fire burning. Look at your own field today. What have you already sown? What needs to be weeded out? What needs watering with attention? Don't wait for perfect weather. Start working with the sky you have. Because the world doesn't change when someone makes a loud promise. It changes when someone quietly starts doing. Be that person. Be the one others want to follow even in the dark. The world isn't waiting for your title, it's waiting for your example.